Welcome, and today we're going to discuss some great mysteries around San Francisco, including the gold rush and the creation of the town in itself, how it goes from 1,000 people to, well, you'll see. And also we'll discuss plagues and earthquakes and fires that devastated the town one after another, and also examine some photos from 1877 that show amazing build-out of the city, which would mean that it was only 20 years into the inception of the city. So here we go. In 1849, there's a large boom in the population of San Francisco, and the town increases from 1,000 people to 25,000 people. So here is the San Francisco Harbor in 1850, or 1851, they tell us. But they continue to tell us, okay, that this just sprouts into existence. Suddenly we have 1,000 people in San Francisco in 1848, and in 1850, boom, we have literally a boom, the gold boom, or the gold rush. And, before we get too far into this gold rush, let's jump over here to just the very history of San Francisco. So, San Francisco, starting overnight as the base for the gold rush of 1849. So really, this is about the shortest introduction to a town that I've seen. Usually we have long, elaborate stories. But this is it. This is the beginning. This is Wiki. And I'm using Wiki because, they're the complete other side. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to what is the accepted mainstream narrative. And here it is on Wiki. San Francisco. Starting overnight as the base for the gold rush of 1849. The city quickly became the largest and most important population, commercial, naval, and financial center of the American West. It was devastated by the Great Earthquake of 1906, but was quickly rebuilt. So 1849, starting overnight, and then let's jump back over here. And here we see that, yes, here it is, 1850. 1850 or 1851, literally starting overnight. And so this city just booms. Suddenly we have this immediate boom. The Federal Reserve Branch opened in 1914. So now we've just jumped from 1850 to the earthquake of 1906. City's just rebuilt, just like that. And now we're talking about 1914 and business, and now to 1960. I mean, just wow. So let's take a little jump now to the World's Fair, once again, of 1915. Just as we saw recently in the Chicago World's Fair, we have a similar situation here in San Francisco. And a very, very, very similar story. And I'm not going to go into it, but it is absolutely similar, that all of these were built to be temporary, and they were torn down. And yet, there are some that remain, and we have some glorious pictures of them, as this one shows right here. And this one is the Palace of Fine Arts, once again. The same designations given to these other buildings at the World's Fair in Chicago. In some cases, as we can see here, this one was actually preserved. And how fortunate, how blessed we are, because this is the kind of picture that we see, and yet, oftentimes we don't actually get to see the real thing. And in this case, you can actually see it still to this day. Absolutely amazing. This throws the whole narrative of them building these structures as temporary structures right out of the water. I mean, this is absolutely the real deal. Look at the size of the people compared to these columns. I mean, absolutely amazing. And this is, exactly what we would find as ruins anywhere in the world. And here they are in San Francisco. And this one is called the Palace of Fine Arts Rotunda. And so, yeah, 1915. Oftentimes, we don't get to see the modern version because it's been torn down. So here we have the Netherlands Pavilion, 1915. What they've done is they've left this structure on the left, but they've torn down this glory, the most glorious part. And I'll show you some black and white photos here coming up. Absolutely amazing resolution showing the whole skyline of San Francisco in the early 1900s. And you can see not only this building, but just tons of buildings like this. You can tell that the whole city was built out in an amazing fashion. So yeah, let's have a look now at what they've replaced this with. Here it is. Here it is. This is what we get today. So this junky building, and for what? And for what? In this case, they haven't even put anything in its place. They just leveled it. So the Palace of Horticulture. I mean, look at this one with the little pieces on top. The detail is astounding. Absolutely amazing. And yeah, so here it is. Here's what they replaced it with. This is it. This was, and they've done a pretty good job of actually positioning themselves, exactly where these things were. So here's, it was, this was more important than this. Of course this had to be torn down. And again, if this was a temporary structure, I'm sorry, but, there is no temporary glass. And again, a palace of transportation. Look at this beauty replaced by this. Here we go. These homes. We're told that San Francisco was built in 1850. In 1850 you have 1,000 people. In 1848, 1,000 people. And buildings like this suddenly arrive. And again, I'm going to show you pictures of the entire skyline filled with buildings like this. Filled. An entire city. And they're going to tell us that 25,000 people were there. And that these buildings were built and torn down. Torn down and replaced by things like this. And things like this. Yeah, same street. And in fact, where there was the sidewalk there, they've still utilized this survey, basically. This perfect survey, which I'll also show you a picture of the grid, from like a map of San Francisco, where the city is perfectly laid out. I mean, perfectly laid out. When they say that, they actually complain and say that the architects, squabbled and, could not come to an agreement on how the city should be laid out. When we look at the layout, it seems like, there was not a disagreement. It's a perfect grid. Perfect. So the amusement zone. So, I think that's what they did. They just took these glorious structures and, have these fairs and, this idea of, even what we call a fair is really just a ruse, just something to turn the eye. So here's what we had again, just basically a part of the city. This was probably a commercial area in this ancient city, and now we have a park. That's it. The park was more important than the original buildings of the city, apparently. No, it all had to go. It all had to go for this park. And the Machinery Palace, again, like we saw in Chicago, the same designations. Look at this amazing marvel. These columns and statues and the Antiquitech. Amazing. And here's what they have replaced it with. This was, again, very important. This is, a city that's starting out, that could use beautiful infrastructure. Who knows? Let's just assume they built it. However, no, now it's not worth it to them. And we need to go backwards and build smaller. Now these are temporary buildings. That's the irony, is when they show us pictures like this and say that these were temporary and built for the World's Fair. How ironic when what we build now, is temporary, not this old glory of the past. And again, and the trees also were, fully grown and brought in temporarily as well for the event. It gets better. It absolutely gets better. The nations of the East, court of sun and stars. This beautiful, beautiful arc of triumph with this amazing antiquitech around it, which I've never seen. By the time we've seen any of these arches, all such things have been removed. But this is one of the most glorious things ever. And here you go. Here's what they replaced it with. I think this is probably an original little sliver left of the facade here, because this does look like the old style. And I think this has been preserved. Just this little facade here seems like the style we're seeing of this old world and of this old people. But far from this, far from this. We're probably just seeing a little piece, just a little piece that they left. And here is the service building. And you see how they've painted some signage up here. In any case, a glorious building, and replaced by this. Still with hints of the leftover world. And of course there would have been skilled architects left over from the old world that would spill over into this period. But no comparison here. No comparison. Just the faintest husk of the old building style. But definitely temporary. Now here is the Liberal Arts Palace and Tower. And this is one of the most glorious ones. And this actually reminds me of some towers that I was looking at recently in Morocco. Beautiful Moroccan style. And now, if you go and look at, some of these images in Morocco, you'll see this, but I think that the tops have been removed, as always. And so all we get is the towers left. But really, really similar style. Real intricate, and same people, I believe. And yes, here we go. Replaced by this. Replaced by this. By this junk. This to this. No good reason could be given, and no good reason has been given for doing such things. Notice the Antiquitech antennas even at the gates here, all with the little starry things. And later, basically we would turn every piece of Antiquitech into a flagpole, if we didn't just remove it completely. And to this day, look at where your flagpoles are, especially on your older buildings. So the State of Washington Pavilion, look at this beauty. And they replaced this with nothing. But yeah, this was really important to get rid of, to make room for nothing. This glorious, glorious structure. And what I'll show you here soon is that the World's Fair in San Francisco, which was basically held where, this must have been the capital of the ancient city. Just like in Chicago, it must have been the capital of the ancient people. And this is the reason for destroying these capitals, having these World's Fairs and then leveling these capital districts, and then the rest of the town would be done in by the earthquakes and the fires, and little pieces would remain here and there. But these capitals were laid out amazingly and were something else. So now let us jump over here to this amazing little group of pictures. These are all what I've been showing you, but these are actually the real photos as opposed to the lithograph types. And this is actually from, apparently from a 1915 family photo memories. So, this may be somebody's private collection because it was very difficult to find any real photos of this. somebody really went to great lengths to, bury a lot of these old photos. Here we go. Again, like I was showing you earlier, but now this, what we are being told, was built for temporary usage at the World's Fair in 1915. And again, San Francisco in 1848 had 1,000 people. And now look at the weathering. Look at the aging of this and the intricacy. So we're to believe that, in 50 years, they create this amazing, and once again, not just buildings, but a city. The splendor of these buildings, and really no difference to what we saw in Chicago, and what we see in Paris, and in Greece, and in Portugal, and in Russia, and in South America. In every part of the world we see these. But I don't know if anybody has such a ridiculous story as we do in America for ours. Look at this. And a double arch. An arch and then another arch. I mean, look at the size of the people and the doorways. I mean, we cannot recreate these arches now. And we don't. And we didn't. And here we just have ruins in the brush, in the overgrown brush, showing, the age of this era and these people. Just mind-blowing. Mind-blowing in every way. Just a city full of antiquitech and marvel. Just absolute marvel. And when you look at what we replaced all of this with, it's just a shattering proof to our false historical narrative. Look at this column. I mean, this is what we see in St. Petersburg. The size of it. And again, they tore this down. And nowadays when we make concrete columns, we see these same types of, spiraling lines because you use like a cast. But we fill it with junky concrete. And this type of geopolymer is, some kind of a marble granite. Absolutely amazing. And again, to tear things like this down, really just to hide our past. And all these inheritors of this civilization. This is the gold rush. This is the true gold rush. Imagine the amounts of gold and luxuries just laying around for the plucking. Just inheriting a city. I mean, so much luxury that you can afford to just tear most of it down, and you take what you want, and you rewrite history, and then you bring in some plagues and some earthquakes and some fires after you've, plundered, and you reset things again. That was already one reset. People walking in. I mean, the old people are already gone. They're already gone, and now the people move in 1850, in 1900, 50 years of reaping the ancient culture, and what do? Then we get reset again by a fire and an earthquake, and we're told that the town is wiped out and rebuilt within, 10 or 15 magical years, and then again we begin, and now, because, these new people, after the fire and the earthquake and these similar, things happen all over, and we have the mud floods, and now people don't remember. Now all of a sudden they don't even remember, and now by the time 1915 comes along, you have a depression and a World War I, and people's minds are in the mud, literally, with all this chaos. And now history is conveniently rewritten. And yet, it's all here. It's all here for us to see. And thank God that these photos are actually preserved, and we can see what our past looked like. This is a statue of the old world. This is a symbol of the old world. Now I want to take you to this amazing picture. And this is a very, very early photo. A beautiful panoramic view of the city before it was destroyed. So this is a photo from 1877. The photograph was taken from the tower of the Mark Hopkins Mansion Then the highest point in San Francisco at 381 feet above the harbor. So here we go. 1877. So let's review our narrative just to have it fresh in our minds. In 1848, there's 1,000 people. 1,000 people. And by 1850, you have 25,000 people. 25,000. Now ask yourself, in this short amount of time, if it's even conceivable that the city should be built out in this fashion in 15 years, 10 or 15 years. Or is this city much older than 1850? I mean, a baby. They're telling us that it's a baby in 1850, and here we are in the 1870s, 20 years later. In 20 years, can you conceive of building something like this in 20 years? I mean, look at this onion dome, for example, on top of this cathedral. And the layout and the engineering, just remarkable. No, this was not just some city that was thrown together for a gold rush. This is something else. The perfection and the resolution of this photography. I mean, look at these buildings. Just amazing for this time period. I mean, this isn't a young, booming gold mining town. I mean, we've all seen gold mining towns. This is an established town. And let us continue. Look at this thing. Look at these two. Some of the mansions. And a little peek at some of the Antiquitech being used at the time. Neptune's trident. Antiquitech everywhere. 1870s. 1870s. I mean, we're not supposed to really have power until, 15 years after this photograph. Yet, it appears that there is poles and clearly power lines down here, and clearly an infrastructure. But we're told that the infrastructure collapses because the town grew too fast and they had to rebuild the whole infrastructure. Well, no, I think that the old one failed. Just remarkable. I mean, again, just, looking at this, and you all know better, I know. This is not a city of 25, 50,000. This is a city of 1,000,000 people as we see it in 1870. And again, it just doesn't fit the narrative. And again, here is the one of the palaces. I don't know if this was the Palace of Fine Arts or whatever designation they gave it, but regardless, this is the old city. This is the old capital. And this is also what they would call the World's Fair of 1915, the Pan American Expo. This is what we're told they built. Amazing. Just amazing. And again, a little gold rush town. No, and this is much older. This is much older and much more weathered. And nobody on the coast, even though we're told that it was bustling and ships had to wait in the port because it was so busy. And yet, what do we see? 2 ships here. Typical of what we see, empty streets, empty seas, fresh from a reset. And now here I just wanted to show you a layout of the city. So, this would be made for the 1915 Panama Pacific Expo. And, this was basically your tour guide, like you would get at Disneyland. You would get a little map of where all your amusements were. And in this case, they, wanted to make sure that people would know, where all the amusement was. So all the amusement was in this little corner right here, which you can see here. And I'll zoom into it here in a minute. But this is where they would supposedly build the World's Fair for 1915. And they would lay out this glory. And again, The city's built in 1850, they tell us, in 1850, 1,000 people, and now in 1915, in 50 years. I mean, this story in San Francisco is as bad as Salt Lake City's. In 50 years, you went from Mormons with wagons to a complete and bustling city with old Greco-Roman architecture that has signs of mud flooding and aging like anything that we see anywhere in the world. And yet, look here, we have canals carved in for miles. I mean, I don't know how many miles this could be. And these roads and everything is perfect. I mean, this city is perfect. This doesn't look like a city with some unorganized gold rushing miners that just came in here. No, I mean, this thing has been planned to the T. And now let's move in here. Let's move into this part that I was telling you is supposed to be the site of the World's Fair. And here we go. I mean, can you imagine? Imagine laying out something like this. I mean, this, again, like we saw in Chicago, 600 acres. 600 acres of development for a usage that would last 1 year only to tear everything down. I mean, where are you getting this kind of funding? Not only to build buildings and lay out waterfronts, but even make, piers. And here they've called this the Fort Mason. I mean, absolutely amazing and completely ridiculous. But yeah, look at this city. I mean, look at this city, in 50 years, they made all these ports, and I mean, just really amazing. There's more than, there's enough to discuss here for, years. But I just wanted to show you this real quick, how amazing the layout is of this city. I mean, this is not a city that was designed on a whim. So that's it for now. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a blessed day, and please like, comment, and subscribe.